At Prescott Elementary School in Chandler, Arizona, Career Week had always been a highlight for the students in Ms. Worthington's third-grade class. It was a break from the usual routine of spelling tests and math drills, a chance for kids to beam with pride as their parents came in to share what they did for a living. That morning, the classroom buzzed with excitement as children sat cross-legged on the reading rug, waiting for their turn. Among them was 8-year-old Jallen Brooks, a bright, curious boy who was practically bouncing in his seat. Though small for his age, Jallen had a spark in his eyes and a way of speaking that made it clear he paid attention to the world around him. Today was especially important to him. His father was scheduled to speak later that afternoon. When Mr. Denton, the teacher, asked each student to share what their parents did, Jallen sat up tall and proudly declared, "My dad works at NASA." His voice was filled with certainty and pride, but the reaction in the room was immediate and cutting. A snort from one student, a whispered, "Yeah, right," from another, and worst of all, a dismissive laugh from Mr. Denton himself. The teacher, a man who should have been encouraging dreams, chuckled and suggested Jallen use his imagination more realistically next time. The air shifted, laughter spread, and Jallen's excitement quickly turned to embarrassment. His shoulders sank, his words dried up. What had begun as a moment of pride had instantly become one of doubt and isolation. In that instant, Jallen's belief in himself was shaken, not because he was wrong, but because someone he trusted couldn't see the truth in him. What should have been a proud moment for Jallen Brooks quickly turned into one of humiliation and self-doubt. After confidently telling his class that his father worked at NASA, Jallen was met not with curiosity or encouragement, but with skepticism and ridicule. A few students laughed, one even whispered, "Yeah, right," but the most painful response came from Mr. Denton, the teacher. An adult figure Jallen was supposed to trust. Instead of supporting Jallen, Mr. Denton let out a low, dismissive chuckle and sarcastically questioned the realism of Jallen's statement. "That's quite the imagination," he said, as if working for NASA was an impossible dream for a kid like Jallen. The room erupted in quiet giggles and the tone was set. No one believed him. In that moment, Jallen didn't try to argue or explain, he simply shut down. His hands, once animated with excitement, curled into fists. His eyes dropped to the floor. The sparkle in his demeanor dimmed as he sat silently, trying to make himself small. Mr. Denton moved on with the activity, seemingly unaware of the damage his words had caused. But Jallen wasn't just embarrassed, he was crushed. The doubt planted by a single dismissive comment had the power to unravel his excitement, his pride, and his trust. It wasn't simply about being laughed at. It was about being made to feel like someone with his background couldn't possibly have a father doing something so extraordinary. This moment, brief as it was, showed how easily an adult's careless words can diminish a child's confidence. And for Jallen, who had come in that morning ready to share something deeply personal and meaningful, it was more than just a bad moment. It was a wound, one that silence made worse. One that could have stayed with him if the story had ended there. In the days leading up to Career Week, Jallen Brooks had been full of anticipation, not just because his father was scheduled to present, but because the bond they shared made this moment feel extra special. Dr. Kelvin Brooks wasn't just a NASA aerospace engineer. To Jallen, he was a hero. Their connection wasn't built on grand speeches or strict lessons, but on quiet, meaningful moments, like sitting together in the garage as his father sorted cables and explained how space communication worked. "It's like texting someone with really bad service," his father joked when Jallen asked how long it took for signals to travel from Mars to Earth. These were the kinds of memories Jallen treasured. At bedtime, he had carefully brought a NASA folder into his room, laying it on the bed like it was treasure. He wanted to bring it to school, to show everyone what his dad did. But more than papers or props, what Kelvin offered his son was something even more valuable: belief. When Jallen expressed his fear that people at school might not believe him or might laugh, Kelvin didn't sugarcoat the truth. He calmly told his son, "The truth doesn't need applause, it just needs to be said." That message stayed with Jallen. He practiced what he would say in the mirror, even mimicking the way his dad pointed when explaining things. He drew pictures, rehearsed terms like orbit and Mars relay, and prepared with a mixture of nervous excitement and pride. For Jallen, this wasn't just a presentation, it was a chance to honor his father and, in doing so, reflect the values he had learned at home: truth, resilience, and quiet confidence. In those small shared moments, Kelvin had already given Jallen the most important tool of all: courage. After the painful moment in class when Mr. Denton laughed at his declaration, Jallen Brooks began to unravel quietly. The excitement that had once lit up his face was gone, replaced by a heavy silence and the sinking feeling that maybe, just maybe, his truth didn't matter. Though he had practiced for days, memorized every word, and even prepared a drawing of his father holding Earth and a satellite, Jallen no longer felt confident enough to share. At lunch he sat alone, untouched sandwich in front of him, watching other kids laugh and play, while he stayed still. What stung most wasn't the laughter. It was the ease with which Mr. Denton, a trusted adult, dismissed him without even considering that he might be telling the truth. That doubt, spoken so casually, began to take root. Back in the classroom, Jallen didn't mention his presentation, didn't offer to speak. Instead, he tore up his carefully drawn picture and stuffed it into the bottom of his backpack. As if erasing his preparation could also erase the embarrassment, his mind raced with questions no child should have to ask. What if my dad doesn't show up? What if he gets stuck in traffic? What if Mr. Denton was right all along? Though his father had always been steady, always present, doubt has a way of overshadowing truth, especially in the mind of a child who's just been made to feel small. Jallen watched the clock obsessively, each passing minute stretching the uncertainty further, and underneath his hope that his dad would walk through that door was something darker. The creeping belief that perhaps his dreams, his pride, and even his truth weren't worth believing in after all. The moment had shifted from anticipation to survival, and all because someone didn't believe him. As the classroom inched toward the final hour of Career Week presentations, Jallen Brooks sat in anxious silence, eyes flicking constantly to the door. He had almost given up hope when, suddenly, it opened mid-sentence, and in walked Dr. Kelvin Brooks. Dressed in a sharp blazer, white shirt, and slacks, with a real NASA badge clipped to his chest, he entered the room with calm authority. The moment he stepped in, everything shifted. The classroom didn't erupt with noise or applause, it froze. The same students who had laughed earlier now sat in stunned silence. And Mr. Denton, still holding his clipboard, looked as though the floor had been pulled out from beneath him. Kelvin didn't raise his voice or bring flashy props. He simply introduced himself. "I'm Dr. Brooks. I designed spacecraft." That alone was enough to reset the tone of the room. The disbelief that once coded Jallen's words now turned into awe, realization settling over every student, and especially over Mr. Denton, who suddenly seemed very small. Jallen sat up straighter, eyes wide, his pride cautiously returning, as his father explained his work, helping rockets call home from deep space. The class leaned in, captivated. Even jokes about space iPhones landed perfectly, bringing laughter, including a rare smile from Jallen. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Kelvin, near the end of his talk, said, "I heard someone say earlier that working at NASA might be unrealistic." He paused, looked at Jallen, and added, "I guess some people have a different definition of realistic." With that, he smiled, and Jallen beamed. No loud vindication was needed, just presence, quiet truth, and dignity. Dr. Brooks didn't come to defend his son, he came to stand in his truth. And in doing so, he gave Jallen back something priceless: belief. For Mr. Denton, the arrival of Dr. Kelvin Brooks wasn't just surprising, it was humbling. In front of his students, the truth had quietly corrected a false assumption, and that correction stung. Though he never explicitly apologized in front of the class, the shift in his demeanor was clear. The confident, dismissive teacher from earlier was now subdued, uncertain, standing on the sidelines while the room listened, not to him, but to the man he had doubted. When Kelvin concluded his presentation with a calm, direct remark about what's realistic, he didn't need to name names. The message had landed. Mr. Denton's laugh, once a source of quiet ridicule, now echoed in his mind, stripped of humor and filled with weight. He had unintentionally placed a limit on a child's dream, and worse, on a child's voice. That kind of mistake doesn't just bruise, it teaches. When Jallen quietly reminded him before leaving, "It wasn't your imagination, that's really my dad," it wasn't meant to shame, it was a final affirmation. Mr. Denton was left standing not just in silence, but in reflection. His clipboard felt heavy, the authority it once symbolized now overshadowed by a truth he had tried to diminish. That moment reminded him, and anyone paying attention, that teachers don't just shape students through lessons, but through their reactions, their words, and what they choose to believe. Dismissing a child's voice may feel small in the moment, but the harm it does can echo far beyond the classroom walls. The day after Dr. Brooks' visit, something had shifted, not just in the classroom but within Jallen himself. The boy who had spent the previous day trying to disappear now walked with quiet confidence. He wasn't boastful or smug. He didn't remind anyone of what had happened, but his posture had changed. Shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. His classmates, once quick to laugh or whisper, now gravitated toward him with curiosity and even admiration. One asked if his dad had met an astronaut. Another wanted to know if Jallen could bring a space tool to school. He answered calmly, never exaggerating, never seeking approval, just stating facts. And that was enough. Jallen didn't need validation anymore. His pride wasn't rooted in their recognition, but in something deeper, the unwavering knowledge that his truth had always been real. At recess, Mila, the classmate who had quietly supported him from the start, smiled and said, "They believe you now." Jallen shrugged and replied, "They didn't have to." That response held quiet power. The approval of others no longer defined him. What mattered most was that his father had shown up, not just physically but emotionally, fully and with quiet dignity. At home, over a simple bowl of cereal, Jallen finally asked why people laughed at the truth. His dad explained that some people live in small boxes, and when something doesn't fit, they reject it. But Jallen didn't need to fit into anyone's box. He just needed to keep telling the truth. And now he knew he could. This story reminds us of the immense power our words and beliefs hold, especially when directed toward the young. As adults, mentors, or simply witnesses to the lives of children, we have the ability to either nurture their dreams or quietly dismantle them with a single glance or dismissive remark. Sometimes doubt doesn't come with cruelty, it comes in the form of casual laughter, a raised eyebrow, or an assumption based on limited experience. But to a child, these small gestures can echo loudly, shaping how they see themselves and what they believe is possible. The deeper message here is this: truth doesn't need to be spectacular to be real, and not all greatness comes with applause. As we age, we gain the responsibility and privilege of seeing beyond the surface, of choosing to listen before judging, and of remembering that a child's belief in themselves is fragile, but also incredibly powerful when supported. In a world quick to question, the quiet act of believing in someone, especially when no one else will, can be the very thing that changes the course of their life. And sometimes that belief doesn't just change them, it humbles us too.